living under the gracious gaze of God, especially when we understand its fulfillment in the person and work of Christ. It taps into this larger theme of how God made us with bodies. God made us the way He made us in order to reflect His glory, and also to give us a dignity and a value as persons that's distinct from every other creature. So kind of my elevator speech about the book on the Aaronic blessing is God has made us with faces so that His can shine on ours. And the reason I can say that is because faces are the way we know people, and God has appropriated that image. His face is how we know Him, and He shines on our faces. And so if you take that vertical reality and apply it in the horizontal, now you think of what James says, for instance, with our tongue we bless God, but with that same tongue we curse man who's made in His image. That is, understanding the gracious gaze of God on us means we become aware of the image of God in others as we look upon them. Because looking upon someone face to face is one of compassion and intimacy and fellowship and so forth. So the Aaronic blessing, when you play it out to its implications, you might even run in your mind to Matthew 24 when Jesus said, when you were hungry, you fed me, and I was naked, and you clothed me. And they say, how did we do that? And He said, when you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. And the question that they ask is, when did we see you? So there's something about seeing, and there's something about the faces of people that reflect the image of God in them, that calls on us to view other people as image bearers of God. And that changes a lot of things. It lifts us out of the anger industrial complex that our culture is imbibed with, to to being lovers of people, respecters of people's dignity, even people who don't even know or respect the Lord Himself.
Full and pastorally wise. My guest today is Professor James Eglinton, and he has spent years studying Bavinck and working to share his insights with the English world. In our interview today, James introduces us to Bavinck's life and context, explains his role in the neo-Calvinistic
and this tower is where people can choose their classes and they get their equipment for their classes. And I don't even remember what people chose last time. People chose the mage. They chose the mage.
We're alive today.
Spicy Town RPG.
James serves as the Meldrum Senior Lecturer in Reformed Theology at New College, the University of Edinburgh.
That's why we did it.
And is the author of a major biography.
Beginning day with 1d6 on a 6, a trader arrives.
He's also the translator and editor of several books by Herman Bavinck, including Christianity and Science and Christian Worldview from Crossway.
That sounds fun.
I think I've hit the glass ceiling and I can't see anything but the ravine from the...
Well, James, thank you so much for joining me on the Crossplay podcast.
Thanks, Matt. It's great to be here.
So in the last few years, it seems like I've been hearing the name of a long dead theologian quite a lot. Someone I didn't hear much about growing up, when I was in high school and youth group, even in Bible college, maybe even in grad school a decade ago. I was not hearing his name bandied about like I am today. And I'm guessing that's probably true for many of our listeners, pastors,
we got Spicy Town RPG, D&D
seminary students, regular lay people today who might be more theologically engaged. Nevertheless, they probably aren't very familiar with this guy,
I plan on having everything ready
even
to go.
if they have heard his name a
I worked on that for a while and made a silly video. I'll do my thing. I'm like, I can't probably do better. It'll take 20 hours, but you know what I can do? I can sit down for a day, record this video.
Tell us about
so basically what we do is we play Minecraft.
I don't
know. Does that make any sense? I don't know if it does, but you know what? We did it last time. It's fun to tech. Go with it. Just telling me that it's okay. So go ahead and give me a dice here.
Contemporary theologians today who we all would know probably, who have said some things about him.
You throw the dice on there.
So J.I. Packer called him a man of giant mind, vast learning, ageless wisdom,
and so I have my dice. Those are good to go. My weapons, I use these for any kind of non-combat damage, traps and whatnot. I'll hit my
John Frame,
a little whack with my sword. My voice chat.
Famous systematic theologian today,
Minecraft D&D,
said that his systematic theology, this other guy's, has been the fountainhead of Reformed theology for the last 100 years.
Throw my diamonds away. That's what I want to do. My diamonds here.
Also writing about object he produced.
Food
Richard
torches.
Gaffin
I'm coming torches that way.
said that it was
and, yeah,
arguably the most
it's not perfect,
important
and so basically I
ever
have this tower,
produced.
and this tower is where people can choose their classes and get their equipment for their classes. And I don't remember what people chose last time. People chose the mage, and they chose
and finally the late Tim Keller said, when it comes to theologians that contemporary church leaders should be reading, I don't know of a more important one
Minecraft D&D
than Herman Boving.
There we go. We had new updates,
So my
new rules. We got
first
classes. We got all kinds
real
of stuff. I get diamonds
question
and experience
for
or gold,
you is,
and then players can trade those in for different
Herman
things. I have
Boving,
arrows,
does he
people can
really
use arrows.
live up to
Oh,
the
I did.
hype
Oops, I just rolled my diamond.
that
That's what I wanted to do.
we tend
My
to
diamonds
be
here. There we go.
hearing
Got some food.
today?
I don't know why I have these blocks. I'll just toss
I
those for
think
now.
so. I hope so,
torches.
because I've been
Torches that way. Arrows.
reading him
And, yeah, we're basically
and
good to go.
investing
As you
my
see,
time
not perfect, but that's
and
okay.
reading
Yeah, so
him
basically I have
and
this
trying
tower,
to
and this tower is where
help
people choose
other
their classes
people
and get
read
their
him
classes. And I don't remember
for
what they chose last time.
quite
We chose
a while
the mage.
now. I
Chose the mage,
started reading
and they chose
him
the,
when
I believe,
was in
the fighter. Yeah, the mage and a fighter is what we got right now.
Back in
That's pretty neat.
Scotland,
Your little class abilities and try to balance out the best I can. But we're actually not here. We're actually somewhere else.
I think
Hi.
I'm gonna go and teleport to that village. I think that's where I left everyone's stuff.
2005.
Let's see if my numbers are right. Alright, that one is pretty accurate.
when I
It's up on top of
first
this.
started
It's not
to read him,
village. I think that's where I left everyone's stuff.
and his
How are you introduced to him initially?
Hi.
I'm gonna go and teleport to that village. I think
Well,
that's where I left everyone's stuff.
so his most
Yeah.
important work is called
Hi.
Reform
I'm gonna go and
Dogmatics.
teleport to that village. I think
It's a big 4-volume set, and
Yeah.
it was only translated. It was released in English between 2003 and 2008. So I was at seminary right in the middle of that time, and I had a systematic theology professor, Donald MacLeod, who had read some. He'd actually been reading Bavink for quite a while before then, in snippets that were translated. So he was
still in English.
in English, yeah. So there were little bits and pieces of Bavink that had been available in English for a while. So he'd read those and was really impressed. And then when the Dogmatics came out, you know, for people who were in the know like that, they were aware from the little bits that they'd seen in English that this guy was really something special and his work was amazing. But, you know, unless you could read Dutch, then you didn't know, but you kind of lived in anticipation
Here.
of
Oop. See if my
when
numbers are right. That
someone
one's pretty
would
accurate. Because
finally
it's not helpful for you guys.
translate
There's a
the
camel.
big
We have a camel as well. Low
I
level.
have a camel and a
So
girlfriend.
that happened.
Yeah, it's also a girlfriend. Don't forget the
and then I
Six,
was
Sony? Six, Sony?
just at seminary around the
That's right, I
time
added it
that
to the-
it was coming
the
out.
acquired
And
camel.
then
Hello?
What's Turtle doing?
Name Lola. Don't forget the girlfriend. That's
Clyde
fine.
would
The camel named
encourage
Lola.
us
You
in
got a
class
girlfriend
to read
named Seg Sony.
this guy, Herman
Yeah, I think I have to name
Bavink.
the person myself. So.
Oh, yeah, there's some kind of weirdness with that. Well, it is a real person.
I
He doesn't go around naming people,
wasn't
but
disappointed.
Well, at least I got the name.
I thought
yeah, of course, of
this
course.
is
So
just
they found this little village, and that's kind of where they're staying at because the other village just feels
theology
something a little wealthier at that
you
village.
know,
And so yeah, this is all their stuff. There's all the equipment and things they gathered.
That
So
was
this is their
what I
house,
felt
basically.
about reading.
Yeah, they're staying at the
him
girlfriend's place.
At
They
the
actually made a little sign
time
for it.
as well.
Come on, lady. Later.
And
Just going over
yeah, he
the
does
recap of the last time we
have
played
this
for over a week.
quite
Sig, Lola's house,
remarkable
and significant other.
name recognition across the
Significant others.
English-speaking
There you go.
Christian world now.
So that's this village. Just in there, just left.
Even
There's
if,
a little water in here.
as you say,
Oh, that's
if still a lot
Whoa,
of
there's a little
people
cave house.
might know the name, but they haven't
this is a little
necessarily
cool village.
read the works.
And it's where our adventure will begin.
The fact that the
So,
name
let's go over
recognition
the rules and stuff again.
is,
I wanna remind myself what's going on
is
there.
out there is, I think it's pretty amazing.
D&D system.
Yeah, and I
This.
think you
to
played a role
here,
in
this
that,
window.
even in
There we go.
you've written a
So
biography
this is all
of
of our stats and everything.
Boving.
These are the different
You've
classes.
translated a couple of his works. We'll talk about some of that as we keep going, but maybe
1 hour, which in our time.
take us back
Could also
a
be comic
little
books,
bit.
right?
Help us understand
Just gonna
for
do
those of us who aren't
Okay.
very
Go
familiar
ahead and
with
track.
him, the man.
Discord.
Tell us a
Discord.
little bit about his life. When did he live?
the devil on my shoulder. Maybe I can
where
say,
did
with anything
he
that restores
live,
my renown.
Oh, true,
and
true, 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 true. You could ask for a question.
what did
or
he
you can have a
do?
test.
Yeah. So he was from
Hello,
the
hello, is that just like me? Yeah,
Netherlands.
it's you.
Assist.
He was born in
Yes,
that is exactly what I
1854,
said.
and then he died
let me see.
in
Well, there is something of
1921.
value that we see.
And if you think about
There's a cave
those
behind
years,
the water.
1854 is a
Seek out this
very
cave
different
and find treasure for us,
world
and
to
we'll accept you once again.
1921. I mean,
Yeah.
he lived through a
village
period of
quest. Seek out the cave to
incredible
the east. That is
change.
next to the lake.
He was really
Find
born in
treasure
a very different
and return.
world to
Alright,
the
quest.
one that he died
So I
in.
will go east and find a cave, huh?
And in
He
the
born
Well, you're saying
before
like
the
the cave, I guess
Civil
this is
War in
Yeah,
America,
probably too dangerous for them to explore.
and then died after
Alright,
World
my
War
mighty steed
One.
on a
yeah,
leash.
It's incredible.
yeah.
Still
I
another
mean,
5 hours
it's
till
quite
midnight
a period to live through.
Yeah.
And to live through all of that,
oh, shoot,
and he was a fabulously gifted
you had it, you didn't bring it?
It should
thinker,
be in my chest. I didn't even think about it.
really erudite,
I'll just think it's only midday.
It's actually still morning.
very clear in how he could think
it'll be here,
and
though.
express himself. And to
Of course,
do
I
all
have
of
plenty
that
diamonds. How many diamonds to buy some torches?
from
It's 2 diamonds for all your utility items, so it'd be 2 16.
resolutely
go.
Christian
Alright, you're close enough to the village. I will accept it.
perspective, and to chart all that change
That's a lot quicker
and
than I had one time from
engage
selling all
with
that cocoa.
so many things as he
Ow,
did, it just makes him quite remarkable. So
That's good.
you know,
Cool.
we
That's the first
think
cave
of him,
Alright,
if
looking
we
for some
think
sort
of
of
him
treasure.
at all in the English-speaking world as a
Yep, and feel free to harvest any materials that you discover and
we
you
have
potentially trade
that
for something else.
as
Oh my gosh,
quite
it's so
a
giant.
clear-cut category
Ooh,
for
well,
him.
I have much more copper again.
That's a valid category.
It's a
Let's
valid
see what we're finding.
category, absolutely. He
Well,
certainly was a theologian, a theologian and a half. But in his own lifetime,
Alright, whenever I roll to find something cool, I'm going to try to
what
see
I
if the character
think
can
makes
like
him
where
really
this cool thing is.
remarkable, and what I tried
actually,
to
no, take it back,
draw
sorry.
out
Go ahead
in
and
the
just keep going.
biography
Maybe there's an old
is
hermit.
that alongside his theological
Well, so far
I found a bucket of copper.
he wrote about so many other topics.
I've already got a half stack of copper.
He wrote books on psychology.
Yeah, that'd probably be the
he
weakest
was
material
an
to trade.
educational
But if you're in a class where
reformer
we have
and
trade skills,
also
maybe you can
an
become like a
educational
smithy. You can smith the items and make more
theorist.
money, or smith your own items. That'd be cool.
He wrote a couple
Maybe
of
everyone could choose a trade skill.
biographies. He led a
I'm gonna do a separate
political
thing called
party.
future updates. Question mark.
Not very
We'll brainstorm all of our answers.
successfully, but he did it, and that's
Yeah.
still
Cool.
quite a
So,
thing.
on victory,
He was a member of
If I decide
Parliament
to-
for a decade, a
Yeah, I think you can do the other
really
ones.
effective
Well, I'm just seeing where
Christian in
it's
politics.
taking me.
He wrote poetry.
Third is leading you somewhere
Again,
important adventure craft.
not that well, but
Well, at the very
we
least, I
should
have more
acknowledge
items.
that he
But he
did that.
Took a shot at it.
Yeah, he tried, and he was a journalist. He
Smart.
became
Yeah.
a national newspaper editor. I mean, it's the stuff that biographer's dreams are
I got
made
cover.
of.
Yeah.
Because his life was
The
so
only way to move is to
complex
quickly move
and
them.
textured. So, in his own lifetime, his own
And that means encounter
contemporaries
time.
quite often struggle to find a label to put on Bavink, and
I'm telling you.
there'd be all kinds of debates about, is he a philosopher? Is he, because he wrote a
treacherous,
lot
though,
of
you get to that.
philosophy as well. Is he a
There's a lot, though, you get to that.
historian? Is he a
don't even know how you get to this, I don't know.
theologian? Is he a pedagogue?
Craft
Is he
Ooh, what
a
if you could, like, craft bridges, like-
psychologist? And
While
towards
you're
the end
looking
of
up
his
there,
life,
you can see there's
people
like a big, like,
start
cannonball shot
to
through
settle
the
actually on the
Oh.
label polymath in his own lifetime to try and describe him.
Define that word.
So a polymath. So if you think back to
Ow, nope, that was a pufferfish.
like
Ow.
Leonardo da
It was on
Vinci,
pufferfish.
the idea of the Renaissance man.
I must at least look at
you
this
think of
cannonball hole
What was
on the outside.
Leonardo?
Oh, there's
He
another chunk
was
of
a
big chunk of coal here, too.
painter. He was
Yeah.
an
An engineer.
engineer. He was like a war theorist. He was
Which is my 2-hour break, so actually this is quite a great time to head.
Camel and TP
he
is
was
also
someone who
Unless you want to start here, in which case we can just make
knowledge
a chest and just pause here if you want to pause in the middle of an
different
adventure.
things to a very
Otherwise, you're going to have to walk all the way
high
back. Oh, we just teleport you
level.
back out here.
So that
did you
is
go?
the
over
Renaissance
that way.
man.
remember I swam.
or someone who masters different disciplines. I mean, that's to be to work in different disciplines is a kind of literal meaning of polymath. Bavink was someone who was like that, and that's a little. We've kind of lost touch with what that looks like in the 21st century, because if you think of when Bavink was around, you know, he had to read a lot to master all these different disciplines, but the 20th century was this age of hyper specialization of knowledge and expertise and all of these things. So it's quite difficult nowadays to be, you know, a leading scholar of psychology and theology, just even within theology, just to try and keep on top of things in one niche area.
The advancements in each of these disciplines
are so deep. So, you know, we live in an age of like hyper specialized experts in all fields of life, but there's something that's lost a little bit with not really having a lot of polymaths like Bavink around anymore, in that the life of a polymath shows you one individual who can see a lot of dots and who tries to connect them in a very thoughtful way, and they're just fascinating figures in that regard. And in Bavink's case, he's a Christian who's connecting all the dots and trying to embody this all in one life as well. So there's a kind of holism. It's a really holistic example of how to live as a Christian. And, you know, for us, we live in a very fragmented age, and I think this is what I've found so tremendously appealing and edifying with Bavink and reading him over the years is the Christian faith it's a really holistic faith. It's a faith for all of life, and it shouldn't be something that's just siloed off in one part of your life that's, you know, a faith compartment and it doesn't have anything to say to the rest of life. For Bavink, the whole of life should be an expression of your Christian faith, and that's what he tried to do. So, and that's just such a valuable kind of example.
Yeah, and that gets into the topic of neo-Calvinism. I want to get into that in just a moment, but a little bit more on Bavink the man. You've told us about his professional life, his achievements, even his theological vision. Tell us a little bit more about what he was like as a man. Was he married? Did he have children? What did his friends say about him in terms of his personality?
Yeah, he did marry. So part of what I uncovered when I was writing my biography was that there's a tragic love story there that nobody had really looked at before, because it's all written in his teenage diaries, and his diaries when he's in his 20s and early 30s, but it's all written in Latin as a kind of code language to keep the secret. But yeah, there's a really sad love story there with a woman that he hoped to marry, and then he was rejected multiple times by her father. So that didn't happen, and then he was a kind of sad and lonely singleton in his 20s, and that's why he spent his 20s reading all the time, and that's why he could produce all of this work. But he did marry in the end a pretty remarkable woman, Johanna, who was a really formidable character in her own right, a really industrious, intelligent woman, a passionate Anglophile, really cosmopolitan kind of person, and a very thoughtful Christian as well, who picked up on a lot of his work after he died and co-founded a journal after he died called Christianity and the Women's Movement, which was thinking through the place of women in society in the 20th century from a Christian perspective.
He was a big advocate for women's suffrage.
Yeah, he was. So he married, and they had one daughter. I mean, he himself was he's a reserved person. He's a really,
you see pictures of him, and he's a little intimidating looking. He doesn't look like the most gregarious guy in the world.
Yeah, he doesn't in pictures, but then nobody really did in the 19th century.
They didn't smile much back then.
They didn't. You know, if you have to sit for like 8 minutes to have your picture taken, and you'd have to sleep with a coat hanger in your mouth the night before just to hold that smile. So people looked kind of serious then. So, I mean, he was someone who I think probably projected his thoughts a lot, but maybe less so his feelings. So that kind of personal side. He had a small number of friends who he corresponded with, and they were really his close companions. But they were also spread out internationally. So, like Gerhardus Voss, maybe some listeners might know him. The really important biblical theology guy in the old Princeton tradition. He had a friend who was his polar opposite in every way, and he actually converted to Islam as well, and that was a really important long-term friendship.
A Dutch friend?
A Dutch friend,
wow.
Yeah. And he had a couple of friends who died at various points in his life as well, and then, close companions that he built up friendships with over many years then are ended and separated by death. So he really, he had valued close relationships, but I don't think he was a social butterfly or something like that. So not an outrageous extrovert.
Yeah.
But a really sincere, warm person. So when you find him, or when you find accounts of him from his students, they loved him. And he really gave himself to his students, and didn't kind of hold back from investing in them. So those kinds of accounts you see are of a very warm Christian.
Yeah.
But he was just a very careful thinker in every regard. He wasn't like a swashbuckling. His colleague Abraham Kuyper was this, larger than life character, and Bavinck wasn't like that at all.
Yeah. Did he have any children?
he did, yeah, they had one daughter, and I mean, her family story is also pretty remarkable. And his daughter married a lawyer, and they had 3 sons. And in World War II, they were part of the underground resistance movement against the Nazis because they lived under Nazi occupation. And so this having son-in-law as a lawyer would try and protect Jewish possessions from being taken over by the Nazis, and they would hide Jews in their house, that kind of stuff. And eventually, and the sons worked for an underground resistance newspaper, and they were just teenagers doing this kind of stuff. So they were raided by Nazis, and Bavinck's son-in-law eventually died in a concentration camp. Two of Bavinck's grandsons for the role in the resistance were executed by Nazis. One of his grandsons survived, hidden in the loft of their house, and his daughter survived, but they were a really remarkable family in that regard as well. So, and their story had never really been told before the biography. So there's a kind of postscript telling the story of the Bavinck family after Herman.
Yeah. It's amazing that it kind of connects into even some of his comments about race and racism. He came to America and was very critical of the racism that he found here in the years post the Civil War, early 1900s. That's maybe another conversation. So tell us about neo-Calvinism. That's this term that's often associated with the likes of Bavinck and Kuyper.
Yeah.
What was that movement, and what was his role?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was a movement that sprung up in the late 19th century in the Netherlands, and it was originally a pejorative term. There's a lot of these great terms that stick.
So Calvinism would have been the established framework, and so the neo part was like...
So you could think of it like this. So they were Christians in the Reformed tradition, and they wanted to address the big questions of their day from within that tradition. So if you think of from their way of talking about this anyway, Calvinism for them meant like what John Calvin was doing in the 16th century. And they were in that tradition, but they were aware that they lived in a very different period. So a lot of the questions that they faced just weren't questions that existed in Calvin's time. So you can't just carry on doing Calvinism only with what you find in John Calvin.
What would be an example of some issues that they were facing?
So the Industrial Revolution. Okay, so all of a sudden you have these huge factories, and one person owns the whole thing, but there might be thousands of workers in there, and the factory conditions weren't great in Western Europe in that period, and so you have lots of questions around how do we think through work, for example, or the economy? For Bavink, these people are the image of God, and they spend their lives on factory lines, and they die young because their bodies are just worn out. What should Christians think of that? I mean, that just didn't exist in Calvin's time. Or, we think of a really big issue that's very different in Calvin's time to the late 19th century in the West. In Calvin's Geneva, there was a guy called Miguel Servetus who was an anti-Trinitarian heretic and who was burned at the stake because he was anti-Trinitarian.
Something Calvin himself even approved of.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess in Calvin's own take on this, I mean, everyone approved of it.
Yeah.
Protestants and Catholics. This is a capital offense to be explicitly anti-Trinitarian. And for Bavink and Kuiper, they live in a very different world. Centuries
Much more pluralistic world.
Yeah, pluralistic world where they don't think that people should be executed for being anti-Trinitarians. So the questions that they face are just different, and that means that there are parts of this older Calvinism that they actually want to challenge and revise for what they thought were Christian reasons, actually. That's the neo part that they want to continue to develop Calvinism. So there were people in the background there who also would call themselves Reformed and thought they were drawing on Calvin, but they were really radically revising Calvinism. So they saw this as a living tradition they wanted to continue, and that meant in some ways you have to go back and challenge what you found before. But you also have to expand the tradition because the questions are new. So, there are all kinds of advances in the natural sciences. They're facing questions about evolutionary theory. Darwin is there in the background. There are all kinds of questions about new technologies, the structure of society, the family in society, democracy. That didn't really exist in Calvin's Geneva. Mass democracy is this big new thing that they're having to ask all these questions about. So the neo part is really a way of understanding this older tradition that continues to move forward, and they're trying to push it forward.
How would you draw a distinction between a neo-Calvinistic view of the world that's seeking to engage culture, transform culture? There's a lot of these ideas of living as Christians in the world that precede the rise of neo-Calvinism. So what was the new insight or impulse that they were bringing to this idea of engaging as Christians with the rest of the world?
So Christians who've done this in the past have done so in the context of Christendom, at least in the West. So you're trying to show that Christianity is this basis for it expresses itself in every area of life and enriches all of these areas. But in Christendom, that was done against the backdrop where, fundamentally the way people think about society supports that. But
and even that Christendom was supported by the power of the state.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the state is enforcing this vision of the Christian life.
But after the Enlightenment, so we're talking late modern Western Europe, Christendom is really, for Kuyper, he already identified in the early 20th century, this is now post-Christendom. So now there's not that supportive infrastructure, and now there's actually this kind of challenge across the board that, well, maybe Christianity should be, removed from every area of life, and that kind of vision of secularization that says, religion is a part of our past but not our present or our future. So without any support from that a supportive backdrop, and actually with the challenge to eject Christianity from everything, you have a push in the opposite direction to say that maybe Christianity hinders us from flourishing in all of life, and we're certainly not going to support it. So from that very different backdrop, all of a sudden, Christianity is challenged to give a really positive, holistic account of itself, not just in the church and in soteriology, but in all of life. And Neo-Calvinism is this, in history, it's this attempt to do that in the secularizing late modern Western context, and done with tremendous confidence in the Christian faith that it's going to pass the test.
Yeah.
And actually, so Kuyper's argument is that in those settings, the outcome is even more glorious. So for Christianity to succeed in expressing itself holistically in all of life, in the context of Christendom, that's amazing that Christianity can do that. But to do so when it faces opposition is even better for Kuyper, so that he thought that Christianity looked even more glorious in a post-Enlightenment context when it succeeds in the face of discouragement rather than encouragement. So it's not novel in that sense in their eyes, in terms of didn't just spring out of nowhere. It's an ongoing continuation of what Christians have been trying to do, but they're just very aware of their context.
Yeah, the way the world is changing, the rise of secularization, as you said. So would you say when it comes to Neo-Calvinism as espoused by people like Kuyper and Bavinck, It's fair to summarize their posture towards the prevailing secular culture broadly as one of engagement and transformation, even rather than resistance and maybe retreat.
I think you can see both. So if we're thinking of, Kuiper's life or Bavinck's life, we're talking about like the 1870s, 80s, and 90s, and then that's one particular period where all of this is developing. So that those decades in Dutch culture were really ripe for institution building, and there were lots of different streams in society that all had different visions of the future of Christianity in Dutch culture. And for some people in some of those streams, it was secularization means progress beyond religion, and now we have a secular state that meets all of our needs, and they didn't believe in miracles or the resurrection or anything anyway. So Christianity is just part of our past, and we don't need it anymore. And there were other streams who were trying to articulate different visions of Christianity is important to our future and our present, but
Was it a certain version of Christianity?
yeah. So the neo-Calvinists emerged as one, one group advancing particular claims, and probably the most kind of holistic and way to articulate Christianity in that context. And they had this view that I mentioned before, that orthodoxy is always moving forward and expanding and addressing new questions wherever it meets them. So they were really confident that Christianity could go on to do this, and
because I think the liberal tradition of the liberal trajectories of Christianity, they kind of almost had seems like a continually shrinking Christianity, right? As technological scientific advances are happening, they're slowly eating away at what it means to be Christian.
Yeah.
Whereas you're saying these neo-Calvinists were kind of saying, no. The core of Christian orthodoxy is solid.
Yeah.
And it's going to continue to expand even as we understand the world more.
Yeah, it's always big enough to answer any new questions, and they thought that history wasn't static either. So they thought humans are curious and creative, and they'll always create new questions, but Christianity will always meet that challenge. So in those decades, Dutch culture is very much, busy with its own reinvention all the time, and the neo-Calvinists are a voice within that who are saying, actually, we really need Christianity far more than a lot of people say we do. And they were really successful with this. They created lots of institutions, news.
Yeah, the dog definitely He takes him out. This isn't very good AC. So fair.
But you didn't specify how the other one had to get knocked down. But I think I win this one.
Alright. You win this time. But watch your back.
He like turns around and this cloak like flies through the goes up in this air behind him magnificently. That's like the best. That's his best thing. He is at doing the cloak thing, and he walks away menacingly.
Don't forget about me.
Thanks, Mr.
He seems
Corson.
like a fun fellow.
I like him now.
I definitely feel like we're gonna have a lot of fun sparring with each other come future.
Yeah, maybe when we come back, we can hang out some more.
All right, and Ileana, what do you do with your time?
So I know when we first got here, you talked about, like there were some dead. Are there any injured people that I could spend 2 days healing and helping?
Oh yeah, I think there definitely could be some people who were injured in the fights. Definitely some local townspeople.
Sure, Granny could always use some cleric Bengay.
And there was definitely like at least one person who was a healer as well in the mercenary group. Like they had a pretty good mix of different skill sets. But you could definitely provide some extra support there. Support with healing, the townspeople, and so that's definitely appreciated. And I actually decided to add a church to the village, but I actually didn't decide what it would be dedicated to. Didn't Ileana have a particular god that they were following? Was that a part of your backstory?
Yes. Ileana follows Brexta, the guardian of Twilight and Dreams.
That's right. So why don't we say, to kind of make it interesting, that there is like that this person actually created some kind of like altar. It isn't like a huge church or anything, but that they created some kind of altar to Brexta in the village, and they're the ones that kind of inform you about this. Like, oh, like I kind of like, man, I haven't seen you around here before. Like, you also, and then you kind of share that information, and they kind of say, well, you can stop by any time, and you can connect with Brexta, or do what offerings this person?
Dream catchers, twilight-hued flowers, soothing incense, and soft lullabies.
Yes. So if there's anything, if there's any offerings you want to give, like that's where they would be.
Could I go on the, could we just pretend that Kaylin and Tilda went to Granny on day 1, and then I go with them to Granny on day 2 and see if she has any twilight-hued flowers that.
Papers they found at a university. They were really enterprising within society. And And those things are quite hard to predict. The inconsistency of humans, and also the kind of the mysterious workings in God's providence of His common grace and that restraint.
So we want to talk about that. Very involved in is Christianity and science. And media minds, and every time I go to all these around science, how you with faith, and revolution, and that's exactly what I was focusing on in this book. Tell us about what you do.
Yeah, so the title is science people, and science but in that context, the things have science has a better meaning. So the things have science in context refers to things that you come to know by understanding. So it's not purposely or intuitively, and exactly. And that's true of physics, it's true of geologists, it's true of linguists, it's true of theologians, it's true of philosophers, it's true of solar literature, and it's all knowledge people work on it. And you have to work to find out the basis of methods, and then you need to understand the authority on the all this things are science. And so you have to make history is you don't bias towards some systems or others because they use one right or and that's all science. How you learn relationship with science. And it's the idea of science. Yeah, the idea of science and so I'm really critical of the way the source is because it's not anything. So we should report science to things that you know of empirical and perception, and that's the origin of knowledge. So science is the authority of knowledge, but not real experts. But that's a popular definition. But I think these are all things sciences, and they'll often know the empire. So things more important. So Christianity science, there's Christian science, that's every that's Christianity and science English rather than Christianity social because we thought Christianity social that's still biasing things towards sciences. And we Christianity social because it's up this towards science. Yeah, this over something challenge. So what you have to do is make a case for Christianity as a thing that expresses itself in the life mind. And I began Christian knowledge of lots of things about existence and creation. So I'll include that sciences, things that are known by sensation and but also things that are and the natural science people are two scientists that's why strong information
I think that one of the main questions I'm using today, especially with the new history, has been they often do overstep these other hierarchies, natural sciences, or the biology. They all these philosophical processes. They don't necessarily know they're debating. They are going beyond everything, applying more things based on the biological system. I could really kind of say that.
Celebrity atheists, celebrity atheists, intellectuals, people say you look at science. So this is science.
Philosophy is just people. The mean philosophy has this kind of importance. It's exercise.
Just philosophy and media. But mystery and people things here. And people writing and then people against say, well, let's here. That's something that questions. Things say actually and then you philosophy and I don't never and then I could say push philosophy and all scientific philosophy and I'm Christian sciences just really my philosophy. So yours and that's my mission and faith gives a very pure way of bringing things together. So I'm is not reality and
I'll ask you final fun and some speculative questions about providing find out the answer. So advice about today related to the increasing polarization we see in the goes on west. The polarization, the polarization, is just fracturing all around the scenes. What about that?
I think some people offer a historical memory in the US of what I was like friends in America and what the religion line was the church was the American was the fascinating concept the American religion and the European and the American nice style of things. And so let's yeah, but he's still American religion and number of the Christian. And it's like the war yeah, I'm really sure the church and the people more so you have to remember that. I think that's around the history of Christendom. That offers you the cultural religion. Basic ways of thinking about human beings are relationships that factor in sin, grace, forgiveness. All the difference in how people are different from you. They Christian cultural religions, Western people, and you so many along. But the Christian themselves as it's a perfect synergy of grace. If you have Christians involved and you have Christians like that towards people, there's people from Christian. There are elements of different to therefore all the Christian religions. And we have those traditions. And we have those traditions. And before these Christians
And my feeling is this, everything is later, everything is like between good and evil, and you don't actually you don't need to like, and it's not we think that life evolves as technically based on I think you know like for yeah, so you think those are categories. That's the direction of culture when instead of being seen, which we for a very long time, we would actually recommend when we were yeah, focus, you're trying to be like one of the events, and then you. I think that's basically lots of culture, and there's a lot of race and fairness and their own direction. And therefore we just want to follow what happens. We really make sure everyone knows we love from here and there is this from them. So they probably I think that's basically and then you're saying for science. How body culture about new digital technologies and including the rise of AI and everything and everything right now. Yeah, I think about innovation, rising challenge, and really positive questions, I think that's really the way of thinking about technologies within the context of information. And you know, you talk about AI, really the way to use AI, really visually interfaces. And it's science fiction, like community and then you're rising, you talk about AI, and science fiction is really so there's challenges for humans and that things like the work, because genuinely in society. All things that money is only going to rise of civilization. Yeah, indeed. I think from that, you can actually see something else within the social and intelligence and intelligence to think about technologies. So I think it keeps the Washington digital brand new connections and like and for them, and July and the Netherlands, you know, so both your hands and the all happens here. Yeah, I think I was to your digital brand difference and the new people and very interesting. I think sometimes realize that it's really perfect. So I think these technologies are fertile and will change. And then really I think the questions like the way the technology versus the reaction like lives. And so there's an interest from quite people technology because it's tool based technology. The things we use to technology react. I think from technology means we react to it. So AI will do that. So you can really find the thing about that's important. So you can also one of the elements of expressing individuals we see around us today. Maybe seeing most vividly in sexual relationships things like orientation, gender, which is radical individualism transformation. Well, I'd say that. I'm a lot of individuality over time. And the individuality is getting difficult to believe that like but the challenge that people's people in some way is that when you elevate individuality into ism, then you reach individuality. So individuality is a great thing to be part of for actually to be well seen. So I say that each against this individuality was starting revolution and you like that. So because individuality has been completely crushed by individualism that tells people for example, that's the bigger community that's from you really want yourself all part of being your lives or in you know community to for you and you're responsible for your and you know that's not what you like actually requires distance. Yeah, so you're just saying it's yeah, and but I don't think individuality is one of those challenges how do you reconcile one may individuals and the form nature and so that's the reconciliation of harmony between things events identify projecting this if you part of a bigger group or family something like that and if you individual but you have something both together then you end up with eventually something like a radical communitarian with a team where you've got no style and you're just molds and that's really is unit things you individual things are a piece of different family series two things and you have the genetic equation that produces every individual and it's not just special molds but it's also life just to completely and to all the things that really are not actually produced you think about I mean that's not for I don't know things society things that are a little like the same story and it's first time too great thinkers theologian and Christian how changed the person influence from from church about 2 to translating that Christianity science and Christian worldview. We have a further what ego is not directly caused by using cross class. If you like this conversation in Josh, titled "What You're Thinking Just About Holy Spirit," follow the link in the show notes here. Don't know what's the work on Holy Spirit. You don't find like more you've done. There are no figures and churches. For more content like this, subscribe to my podcast, Spotify, or your favorite player. If you enjoy this episode, share with a friend and leave us a review. Also, it's not a Christian ministry that is solely focused on proclaiming the true gospel. Your bullshit gospel. Visit today at Gospel Power.
Okay. And